Welcome to the Coriolis Effect with Cory Oliver.
Hi guys, I'm Cory Oliver. Thanks for watching the Coriolis Effect. Please hit the subscribe button below, and we hope you like this episode. Hi guys, we wanted to announce that like many podcasters, we just started a Patreon account. Visit our page at patreon.com/the Coriolis Effect. We have 5 different levels of membership and offer early access to episodes, behind the scenes footage, bonus episodes, shoutouts, and much more, including personal phone calls, questions and answer sessions, and live chats with Bob and me. That's patreon.com/the Coriolis Effect. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Cory. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm very well, too. Thank you.
Are you?
I am.
I know it's like a heat wave here in LA.
It is very hot. Yeah, it went from 50 degrees to 90 degrees.
It's so weird. You can't. It's so unpredictable, the weather in Los Angeles. The weather? How was your weekend?
My weekend was well. You think it's the global warming?
Are we going there?
Yeah. Do you think it's global warming?
I'm not, no. But,
By the way, here's my take on that. Everybody says we need to save the planet, right?
Yeah.
The planet will survive.
Yes.
We may not be the dominant species on the planet. We may all die out, but the planet's not going anywhere. The
and
planet's
how do
been
you
around for
feel
billions
about
of years.
global warming?
I think it's a natural process of the Earth. I think it's been happening for millions and billions of years, as long as the Earth's been around. And I think that even if the climate changes, mankind, womankind, personkind will adapt. So let's say the oceans raise 10 feet, we lose the state of Florida. Okay, so now everybody moves to Georgia. And it doesn't happen quickly.
No,
everybody
it's a
will have
gradual
plenty of time
decline.
to move from Florida. It's the people
that panic.
Well, not only the panic, yes, but they don't want to adapt. Perfect example, when I first moved to California, I went up Beverly Glen. You ever see the houses on Beverly Glen?
Yes.
I'll put a picture up here. There are houses that, I kid you not, are 95% in the air and 5% attached to the ground. They're on these 3 big poles. Remember Lethal Weapon when he took that house down? That was one of them.
Yes.
So people, I want to build a house here. It's the side of a mountain. I don't care. I want to build that. So I want to live in Florida. It's going to be underwater. I don't care. I want to go live there. Go build boats and stuff like that. The planet may change. People will adapt. Nevada will become California. So the ocean's a state in. Who the heck cares? Everybody move a state to the left. There's plenty of room. That's my theory.
Thank you.
Plus, I don't believe that what we're doing has any effect on it or has a minuscule
No, you know
effect
who we
on
should
it.
get in on that, weigh in on that is Flat Earth Dave and see how he feels about it.
Yes.
Because I'm sure he has a whole theory on what that is about. So let's have him on again.
Well, the problem with the flat Earth and the climate changes, it'll melt a 300-foot ice cap around the Arctic ice cap. That's what holds the ocean in. If we lose that, we lose all the oceans. Oh, he may be. Oh, we'll schedule him for an interview.
This is why I say yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Well, today we have all of our guests are special. I always say that, but he's very special. I'm excited and I'm a little bit nervous just because of the subject. But I'm also, so if I cry through this whole interview, you will know why. We are interviewing Mr. Darrell Scott, who is Rachel Scott's father, and she was murdered in the Columbine shooting 23 years ago, April 20th, which we're coming up on that anniversary, 1999. And, there's been a lot of press on this and a lot of articles and videos and a movie, I Am Not Ashamed, that's out, and that is about her and her life and her journals. And so I'm very excited to talk to him. He has a charity called Rachel's Challenge, and he continues to, in her honor, carry out her name in just amazing ways. And so I can't imagine. I know you can't either, Marty.
Is the movie about her or about Columbine or both?
The movie is about really her journaling and...
so it focuses on her life.
Yes, and her walk with God and how she felt. And she was she's just a very intense young girl. I didn't understand God in the ways that she did at her age. Right. And she just, it was amazing. And, she, at her last moment, professed that her belief, and they took her life. And it talks about the two guys, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, that did that. And so. Did
they both die?
They did. They shot themselves.
They shot themselves?
Yes. So there's a lot to get into, and I'll let him tell the things that he has to share. But
and his foundation is called
Rachel's Challenge.
Rachel's Challenge.
Yes. And so I'm very excited today. I spoke with him a little bit on a pre-interview, and just a lovely man, and I can't imagine. So I'm praying God gets me through this interview.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
I know, but but he's works all things together for good. So,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Well, we will see you in a few minutes.
Okay.
This episode is sponsored by Brizo Healthy Fruit Tonic. With Manuka honey and apple cider vinegar, less than 4 grams of sugar, and under 35 calories per can, each of Brizo's 4 flavors not only taste great, they are an excellent source of vitamin C. Brizo boosts your immune system and is great for your post-workout recovery. Brizo, available on Amazon and at brizo.com. We want to take a minute and talk to you about ExpressVPN. Most people don't know that your internet provider, many websites, and even apps collect all of your data and then sell it to whoever's willing to pay for it. They know what websites you visited, what products you've bought, what products you looked at and did not buy, and some people can even copy your passwords and usernames and then access your private accounts. ExpressVPN encrypts all of your data and sends it from their servers, so no one knows where you are. With ExpressVPN, people may think you're in Bangladesh when you're really in Chicago. They would think you're in South America when you're really in Detroit. ExpressVPN protects you from hackers who try to steal your information, and also from spies who try to use your data for their own nefarious purposes. ExpressVPN also allows you unrestricted access to all parts of the internet. How does it work? ExpressVPN uses the best-in-class encryption. Whenever you are connected to ExpressVPN, every piece of data going in and out of your devices goes through a security crypted tunnel and cannot be seen. Not by the government, not by hackers, not by your internet service provider, not even by ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN also employs IP masking. Every device has a unique IP address, which can be traced back to you. When you use ExpressVPN, your connection gets routed through one of their 3,000 plus servers, hiding your real IP address and replacing it with one of their own. This allows you to browse the web truly anonymously. With servers in 94 different countries, you have a wide variety of places you can choose to appear from. ExpressVPN also provides 24/7 customer support with live chat, which means your question will be answered within seconds, not hours or days. It is also one of the easiest apps to use. Just open the app, and with one click, you're protected. It is also physically impossible for any of ExpressVPN's servers to store logs of any customers. And ExpressVPN is a top-rated VPN provider, rated #1 by CNET, The Verge, Wired, TechRadar, and many more. Just go to expressvpn.com/Cory to get 3 extra months free with a 12-month plan. This is a limited time offer for the Coriolis Effect with Cory Oliver listeners. Again, get 3 months free with a 12-month plan. Go to expressvpn.com/Cory. With ExpressVPN, you can protect all of your digital devices, your computers, your phones, your tablets, everything, and have no more border restrictions. Again, that's expressvpn.com/Cory. All right, let's start the show.
Yes, let's start the show. Good morning, everyone. As we just talked about in our pre-interview, I have a very special guest, Mr. Darrell Scott, who is the father of dear sweet Rachel Scott, whose life was taken way too soon in the Columbine shooting on April 20th of 1999. Almost, we're approaching the 23rd anniversary, and by the grace of God, we have him on the show today, and so I can't thank you enough for joining us, and I look forward to speaking with you and to see what you're up to. And I just want to say good morning and thank you for being on the Coriolis Effect.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you today. It's another week and a half or so, and it'll be the 23rd anniversary of the Columbine tragedy. Seems like it was just yesterday for our family, but Rachel was 17 years old when she was killed, and she's been away from our family now longer than she was with us, which seemed almost impossible. But if we just take a step back in time and revisit what happened that day at Columbine High School, we do presentations in schools and colleges, universities, churches, community centers all around the world. In fact, we have 50 presenters that reach out and reach about 1 to 2 million students every year in schools, universities, and colleges. And we begin with a video clip that takes us back to that day to remember what happened at Columbine High School.
Well, let's see that. I would love to see that. And I wanted to say for the record, I was bullied terribly in school, and so your charity and what you're doing resonates with me largely. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Attention South Units, have possible shots fired at Columbine High School, 6201 South Pierce, possibly in the south lower lot towards the east end. 1 female is down.
Shots in the building. I need somebody in the south lot with me. Scott's code 33.
Jefferson County 911.
Yes, I am a teacher at Columbine High School. There is a student here with a gun.
Okay, has anybody been injured, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and the school is in a panic, and I'm in the library. I've got students down under the table, kids. Heads under the table.
2 suspects inside the school with shotguns, Uzis, and pipe bombs.
I've got a fire inside the building, west corner. I had about another 8 students come out to me.
Smoke is coming in from out there, and I'm a little afraid. The gun is right outside the library door, okay?
Shots fired from inside. Looks like another party down on the northwest lawn.
Northwest lawn, another party down. Units, we have information possibly shots fired in the library.
On April 20th, 1999, Columbine High School experienced the worst high school shooting in American history. Shots echoed across the school grounds as police exchanged fire with the 2 shooters. When the smoke cleared, a teacher and 12 students had been murdered. The 2 boys who did the shooting then shot and killed themselves. The first student killed that day was Rachel Joy Scott. Known for her love of life and her kindness, Rachel left a legacy destined to touch the hearts of millions of people around the globe.
Not only did my daughter die that day, but my son Craig was in the library where most of the killing took place, and he was there with 2 of his close friends. Craig was on the wrestling team at school, and his 2 buddies were both on the football team. And the shooters came into the room and opened fire, and they killed 10 students right there all around my son. And they walked over to the table where he and his 2 friends were. They had dove underneath the table, and they shot and killed both of his friends. My son lay there covered in the blood of his 2 friends, looking down the barrel of 2 guns aimed at his head. And he knew that he was going to die. But a split second before they pulled the trigger, the alarm system went off from smoke in the room, and it distracted the 2 boys, and they didn't come back to the table where Craig was at, or I would have lost 2 of my children that day. But Craig helped rescue some of the kids that were injured, and he took a young girl whose shoulder had been blown off from a shotgun blast, carried her out to a police car, and he ran past the body of his sister on the sidewalk. And fortunately, he didn't look down to see who it was, or it would have probably broken him right there on the spot. But we almost lost 2 of our children that day. And Rachel was known for her kindness at school. And when we, after the tragedy was over, I went to the police station and picked up her backpack, and we found her final diary. She had left us with 6 diaries. She was inspired by Anne Frank to keep diaries, and she left our family with 6 diaries. And this is the cover of the final diary that was in her backpack that day. And on the front, she wrote, "I write not for the sake of glory, not for the sake of fame, not for the sake of success, but for the sake of my soul." And on the back of this diary, in big letters that reflected her personality, she had written these words: "I won't be labeled as average." And beside those words, you see a hole in her diary where a bullet entered after it passed through her body, as though it's an exclamation mark to that statement: "I won't be labeled as average." And today that mantra has been repeated by millions and millions of young people around the world who pick up her challenge to not be labeled as average, to make a difference, a positive difference in the world. So her life is counted.
It has counted, and there's many other things that we'll get into that were signs along the way. I've watched her movie. I've been following her for years. I was a lot younger when this happened, 23 years younger, and my daughter is going to be 23 in May, and so it was right around that time, right? And I just can't imagine what you've gone through as a family and as a father. My heart goes out to you. It blows my mind. I love what you're doing, and I love that in all that I've researched about Rachel, she had so much wisdom at such a young age. And she felt so much at such a young age. She had that compassion for others and the empathy, and she felt their pain. And as I understand it, she was actually outside helping someone in the moment, right? That she was, her life was taken. So she was always, she just seemed like she was always trying to help others. And she almost knew instinctively that her life was going to reach so many people.
Yeah, she did. She actually, she wrote an essay a month before she died for her 5th period class. The teacher said you can write on any subject that you choose. And so she chose this title. She called it My Ethics, My Codes of Life. And in this essay, she talked about forgiveness. She talked about compassion. She said, I have this theory that if one person will go out of their way to show compassion, it will start a chain reaction of the same. People will never know how far a little kindness can go. And right near the end of this essay, she wrote these words. It wasn't until recently that I learned that the first and second and third impressions can be deceitful of what kind of person someone is. Let me ask you something. Did you look into their soul and not just at their appearance? Until you know them and not just their type, you have no right to shun them. You've not looked for their beauty, their good. But look at the middle part of what she wrote here. She said, let me ask you something. Did you look into their soul and not just at their appearance? Did you look into and not at? And one of the things we challenge young people to do is to become see-throughers and not look-atters. We learned that from a mentor in my life, a gentleman by the name of Norman Grubb, who was a best-selling author back in the 1940s and 50s. Norman was a World War I veteran. He fought for the British in World War I. And after he came out of the trenches of that horrible war, he became a man of peace. And he wrote 40-something books, and most of them were bestsellers in the Christian arena. And Norman became a very close friend of mine and a mentor in my life when I was in my late 20s. And I'll never forget, one day he made a statement. He said, Daryl, if you will learn to be a see-througher, not a look-atter, life will have purpose and meaning. He said, don't look at people. Learn to see through the surface to the person that's really hidden on the inside. Ask yourself the question, have they experienced love? Have they experienced rejection? Have they experienced hatred? Have they experienced suffering? And he said, you'll get to know the real person. And he said, don't look at your circumstances. In fact, he said, on the worst day of your life, if you will practice being a see-througher, not a look-atter, your life will have purpose and meaning. And I remembered those words after Rachel died, and they helped sustain us as we began to practice being see-throughers and not look-atters. In fact, I've got a picture of Rachel with Norman Grubb shortly before he died.
I was just going to ask you, did you tell her those words younger, in her earlier years? They must have stuck with her. Yes.
Now, I taught all of my children some of the things that Norman had taught us. And in fact, after Norman died, I write a lot of poetry, and I wrote a little poem to honor the lesson that he taught us about being a see-througher and not a look-atter. And here it is. A wise old man once said to me, don't trust the things your eyes can see, for if you do, you'll know confusion, always judging by illusion. Don't look at, see through, my friend, beyond the frown, the sneer, the grin. Peer deep into the living soul, where beauty, wonders will unfold. Fear and judgment fall apart when your view is from the heart. So don't look at, adjust your view, and focus deeper, seeing through. And I actually shared that with Oprah Winfrey. I was on Oprah's show several times, and this particular episode, my son was with me, and it was about forgiveness and being able to see beyond the circumstances. And I shared the story of Norman Grubb with Oprah, and she made a simple statement that I never forgot. She said, Daryl, people find what they look for. People find what they look for. So we challenge young people to look for the best in others. That's one of our challenges. That's why we call our program Rachel's Challenge, because we have quite a few challenges that we leave with them. And the first challenge is to be a see-througher and not a look-atter. The challenge to look deeper into who a person really is. And I always will remember Norman Grubb for teaching us that lesson. In fact, Norman was my Yoda, And I jokingly, I
That's
showed this
cute.
picture to them and said,
Yeah.
I'm not sure he would have appreciated the comparison, but I do see a little bit of resemblance there.
Well, there's always like that one person in your life that sows such a magnificent seed, and it sounds like he is one of those ones that did that for you. And you know, as I hear you speak, and as I've watched a lot on Rachel, you know, she embodied the scripture: "Whatever you do not do for me, you do not do for the least of me." That's biblical, right?
That's
and
right.
She seemed to see through, with the help of, you know, Mr. Norman Grubb and her father, you. She seemed to see through people's outward appearance, and having watched her movie and her programs, and she really had a heart of compassion. And she, to this day, as I understand, there are kids and people that write into your organization saying that she has saved their life. And so
Yes.
I always say, if you can turn your pain into your purpose, then the pain was somewhat worth it.
Absolutely. And I love that phrase, pain to purpose, because I've had to counsel with a lot of people who've lost their children. And I always encourage them to remember the good things, remember the good times, and to focus on that, not focus on how they died or the negative things from their life, but to keep alive their memory by focusing on the good things. One of the things we found after Rachel died, on the back of her dresser, when she was 13 years old, she and my daughter Dana had been drawing some things on the back of Rachel's dresser. And on Christmas Day, 2 years after Rachel died, we had moved her dresser from one room to another, and we found something she had written on the back of her dresser. And it was this. She said she had drawn an outline of her hands, and she wrote in the hands, "These hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts." And by the time we found this, I had already spoken to over 2 million people in live settings. And today we've spoken to over 25 million with our team around the world, not just here in the United States. So her hands continue to touch the hearts of millions and millions of people, some of them that the whole world knows, like Elton John, who we met with personally, Chuck Norris, who became a good friend of ours and served on our board of directors, Kayleigh McEnany, who was the press secretary for the White House, and Charlie Kirk, who's got a program called Turning Point. And the list just goes on and on of people of influence that Rachel's life has touched and changed. In fact, I was playing golf a couple of days ago with Rick Santorum, who ran for president, and his family was deeply impacted by Rachel's challenge as well. So her life is counted, and she has touched the hearts of millions of people.
It has counted, and it's almost as if, you know, all of us have those prophetic moments in our lives, right? And this was one of them, where she traced her hand. I mean, if you're listening to this audio right now, I encourage you to go to the YouTube and watch this, because it's pretty incredible. She traced her hands, and on the inside of her hand, she wrote these words. And it's just incredible that she would have that fortitude to even think in such a grand way. And even in that moment, she knew, and she wanted, and she was passionate about her life mattering in a bigger way. So I was thinking about it after I watched some of, you know, the videos that, you know, we do suffer on this great planet of ours and on Earth. And I know that you've gone through great suffering, immense suffering, and I'm sure that carries on. But you're working this all together for good, which is one of her favorite. As I understand, her favorite scriptures was Romans 8:28. God works all things together for His glory, and He does. And we don't understand it in the moment. I can't imagine what you went through in that moment, but to see you changing lives through her life is such a blessing. And I think getting on these campuses like you are is monumental. This is what we need. I mean, bullying's been around forever, right? I was bullied. Bob probably was bullied. And it's so important that we can get these kids while they're younger.
Well, there's some places in our heart that can only be reached through suffering. It's as though God's placed treasures within us. And sometimes the pain and the suffering opens the door to those treasures and helps us release them. And that's hard for some people to understand. I don't think we need to go looking for suffering and pain. It's going to happen to all of us. But turning that pain into purpose, as you've said, is so radically important. And one of the stories I want to mention, there's many stories of young people that she reached out to at her school who were having a struggle. And one of those was this young man by the name of Adam. Adam was born with both mental and physical disabilities, and he talked different, walked different, looked different, acted different from other students. And unfortunately, because of his disabilities, he was made fun of. He was often bullied. And the first time that Rachel saw him was a couple of months before she died. And they were in a hallway, and two boys had knocked his books out of his hands and had shoved Adam up against a wall and were making fun of him. And my daughter saw what was happening, and she was furious. And she should have gotten a teacher or an adult to stop what was going on. But instead, she ran down the hallway, got between those two boys and Adam, doubled up her fist, and she said, if you touch him again, you're going to have to fight me.
I love her.
I'm sure they weren't that afraid of her. She was half their size. But they backed off, and she and Adam became friends. And after she died, we met with Adam, and he told us with tears streaming down his face, he said, Mr. Scott, what Rachel died not knowing was that I was planning to commit suicide. I was planning to take my life, and I knew how and when and where I was going to do it. But when she stood up for me that day and she got her friends to be my friends, I changed my mind about taking my life. And as a result of Adam's story, as we share that with millions of young people every year, we get feedback from so many of those young people. We see around 150 suicides prevented every single year. And I want to just play this video clip that gives you a glimpse of one or two students whose lives have been saved because of Rachel's challenge.
Okay.
Some of the students we hear back from are ones who were planning to commit suicide. And over the last 3 years, we received around 500 of those emails from students who were planning to take their lives. And every single page in that book represents a life that may not be with us except for Rachel's challenge coming to their school.
Holding this stack of papers is unbelievable. We believe that everyone's important and everyone has a story.
It was 3 years ago that 19-year-old Hope lost her hope.
I had everything planned out, and I actually had a rope and pills in my bedroom waiting for me when I got home.
We show with Rachel's challenge that a 17-year-old girl, the value that her life has had, kind of opens their eyes to say, I can make an impact in this world, and I matter. A teenager might have thoughts of suicide because they feel so unimportant, that they don't matter, that they don't have value. They can't see the full value and scope of their life at 16 or 17. And we want them to know that they are important, that their life has so much value. And it keeps me going when I've literally had students come up to me after a presentation telling me that they were going to take their life.
Before this, I was suicidal. I was thinking about it my whole life.
God, you give me so much inspiration.
You're probably one of the reasons I'm alive right now.
And simply by them not giving up, they actually end up helping someone down the road that's on the verge of giving up. Because they can say to that person, hey, I've been there, I've been in your shoes, but it does get better. And they can share with them their story that can help that person.
I really do have to agree with the chain reaction thing, because without Rachel's challenge, this little one wouldn't be here, and he is my heart and soul, my entire world. I would do anything for him.
So we get to hear these stories over and over and over again from young people who've given up hope. And, the CDC, Centers of Disease Control, have said that the number one cause for suicide and for cutting and for all the things that young people are doing to themselves in a negative way are results simply of not being connected with others. And so one of the things we emphasize very strongly is connection. And we help provide that connection because when we do our assemblies, we do much more than just an assembly. We have an assembly as a kickoff, and it's the emotional impact that makes the young people want to change, want to make a difference. But then our presenter also does a 90-minute training, and we create what's called a Friends of Rachel Club. We call them FAR clubs, Friends of Rachel. And our FAR clubs do amazing things. Like many schools now have built into their school a classroom that's called Rachel's Closet. And the students in the club will go to the local clothing stores and get brand new jackets, brand new dresses that are donated, brand new pants, shirts, shoes, socks, underwear, all that's needed for wardrobes. And one classroom will just be full. Looks like you're walking into a clothing store. And any student that comes to school that needs a jacket, needs a pair of shoes, needs socks, or whatever they need, they can go into that room anonymously and pick out the things they need to wear. And it's just been a blessing for so many students that can't afford the right kind of clothing. We also have schools that have Rachel's Pantries. And again, it's another classroom just full of food, cereal, perishables, non-perishables, soups. It's called Rachel's Pantry. And if they're hungry when they come to school, they can go in and get something to eat. And they can even do it anytime during the day. When they go to leave school, they can take a can of soup home with them. And then we also have hairdressers in cities all over the United States that volunteer their time to go to the school. We call those Rachel salons. And they'll cut on a Friday or a Thursday or Friday. They will donate half a day to giving haircuts and hairdos and, whatever's needed. So
sign me up for that. I have my hair license. If you have any here, I have my hair license. I love that you have all these things. And I'll share just a really quick story with you that I'm not sure I've actually ever shared on the air. But when I was in kindergarten or first grade, I was teased horribly by a man named Fernando Gonzalez. And every day he would wait for me in the lunch line, and he would make me give him my lunch money. Or he was going to beat me up. And I remember him to this day. He had his hands in his pocket. And I just remember him being so big, even though he was the same size as me. I was petrified, terrified that he was going to beat me up in line every day for 2 years, until one day I took a $2 bill because I didn't have 10 cents for milk money. That's how old I am. I took a $2 bill from my mom's purse, and I knew I had to give it to him. And long story short, the lunch lady was kind of on to him, I guess. And she asked him where he got this $2 bill. And he said his mom gave it to him. And they were very rare back then. And so she said, "Let's call your mom." And he said, "No, Cory gave it to me." Well, they took me into the principal's office, and I just fell apart, crying and sobbing, because finally someone knew, right?
Yeah.
And they promised me that day that, it was never going to happen again. But I just remember thinking, I knew back then, hurt people hurt people.
Yeah.
Somehow instinctively, I just knew that hurt people, and that, he must have really been hurting to want to do that. But I think of that story only to say this, that a lot of these kids suffer in silence, and they don't have anywhere to turn to. And
That's
so
right.
to have an organization like yours that has obviously gone through such great pain to get to this point where you can impact others is beautiful and amazing. And that's why this story has resonated with me so much, because I've, on a smaller scale, have been through that immediate pain of like not knowing, right? You're frozen. I froze. I just every day hand it over. So It's wonderful.
That's a powerful story. We hear a lot of those. What we've trained our Friends of Rachel Club members to do, and usually the club starts off with about 100 students, but many times it grows. And in some schools, almost every student is a member of the Friends of Rachel Club. But we train them to be on the lookout for students like you who were being picked on or being bullied by others. And so we give them training on how to approach the right person to make sure that it was taken care of. And we hear a lot of great stories that come out of that.
You know,
So
Mr.
thank
Scott, this is the beautiful tiny bow on this particular story is that years later, maybe 10 years ago, Mr. Gonzalez reached out to me. And I'm not sure if he was in a program or not, but he did apologize. And so and in that forgiveness was, you know, obviously for both of us, hearing it was amazing for me, and for him being forgiven, you know, that affected him at such an early age as well.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
You know, there's so many elements of what you're doing on both sides of the spectrum that is healing and you know, honoring each other in that moment. So I love that.
Well,
and you do
thank
it safely, you know?
Yeah. It has to be the right approach. But Rachel's story has gone not just through our programs, but we've actually won 3 television Emmy Awards because of Rachel's story that's been shared. And there's been a major motion picture about her life. And then there's been several documentaries. So we can't keep track of all the people whose lives have been touched. I was just in Mexico, in Guadalajara, a few weeks ago, and we have 9 full-time employees there in Guadalajara, and they're currently reaching over 20,000 students every week. And they've just been approved by the government to do the training for social emotional learning for every teacher in the whole country of Mexico. It's going to take them a few years to accomplish that, but they're going to be doing it through Zoom as well as live presentations. So
you know,
her impact has gone so far.
Oh, it's huge. And one of the things that resonated with me too is this is just a statistic that like, and the number's probably grown since I saw this, but 160,000 kids skip school a day because of being afraid to go to school.
Yes, that's right.
That's incredible. And I know that feeling because there were moments I did not want to go to school, right? And so she was just one of those students though that stood up. And I just, tell me a little bit about what she was like, you know, when she was younger, like I would say between 0 to 5.
Well, she was the kind of child that would bring home the stray dog or the stray cat. And so we were always having to deal with that. But she, you know, some children are just born with a heart of compassion. And she was one of them. She was one of the rare ones that in her entire 17 years, she always looked out for the underdog. She always looked out for the person who was being left out. And there are people like that their whole life. And I'll give you an example of, I mentioned Chuck Norris earlier. Chuck is a good friend. In fact, I'm going to be with him this next weekend on Saturday, he and his wife. And I've traveled with him several times. He and his wife have come to see Rachel's Challenge presentations. And I remember distinctly in Houston, I was speaking at a school that Chuck and Gina came to. And I watched him at the end of the presentation. There was a janitor with a broom on that he was leaning on at the back of the room. And he was just looking at Chuck Norris like, oh my God, it's Chuck Norris. And Chuck must have seen that. And I watched him get up and walk to the back of the room, put his arm around the guy. And, you know, he made that man's life. I'm sure that to this day, this was several years ago, that man is still talking about the day Chuck Norris came back and talked to him. And so every one of you that's listening, I want to tell you that person that's in the corner, person that's sitting by themselves in the cafeteria at school or university, they really are craving a connection with somebody. And just a small act of kindness to reach out, to smile, to say hello, to wave to someone, sometimes makes the difference between a person continuing to live and taking their own life. And we've heard those stories.
Oh, I bet. I can imagine. It's it blows my mind. This is how God is continuing 23 years later to affect people and draw people closer to their understanding of themselves, but also to him. She had such a love for God and the Lord and wanting to follow him. And tell me about that journey for her. Was she always, I know she was compassionate and had that, tender heart. And my daughter was the same way, by the way. She was saving bees in the classroom, and the teacher's like, there's some kids that are allergic to bees. We need to watch it. Ariana's trying to save them, But what was her, she knew so early, I was raised a Christian and I understand God and I always believed, but her understanding and her relationship, I guess, with him, if you will, and just the passion and desire to get to know him and want to do what he wanted her to do at such a young age takes a lot of, people a lifetime to get to that point.
Yes. She seemed to just be born with a sense of purpose. I mean, God knows the day we're born and he knows the day we're going to die. If he's God, he knows everything. So he knew the day she was born, how she would die, where she would die, and when she would die. Mm-hmm. And I think that he gave her a special grace because of that. And there were two things that she believed from the time she was a little girl. She believed that her life was going to count, that her life was going to touch the hearts of millions of people. But the other thing that she believed, and I think it was a prophetic sense about her, was that she was not going to live to be very old. In fact, she shared with a number of her friends and told them that she would not live to be old enough to get married or have children. And they said she never did it in a morbid way. It was never downbeat. It was just matter of fact. She talked about the fact that she even wrote in her diary, and she said that she would die as a homicide victim at a young age, which is just unbelievably prophetic, because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And 6 weeks after her funeral, I got the strangest phone call I've ever received in my life. It was from a man by the name of Frank, who is a good friend of mine now. Frank lives in Ohio, in Youngstown, Ohio. And today he pastors a church there, but he was a businessman 23 years ago when Rachel died. And he called me 6 weeks after her funeral. And he said, "Mr. Scott, you don't know me. We've never met." But he said, "I've had the strangest thing happen." He said, "The last 2 weeks, I've had a reoccurring dream every night. And it's the same dream, and it's about your daughter's eyes." And he said, "In the dream, I see a trickle of tears falling from her eyes, and the tears are falling to the ground." But he said, "There's life coming out of the ground from her tears. Something's growing from her tears." And I told Frank, "I'm sorry, that doesn't mean anything." But in fact, I'm going to play a video right now that we made of Frank telling that story years later.
I had this vision of the eyes of a girl, of a sweet girl, and out of those eyes were coming tears, and the tears were pouring to the ground, and something was beginning to grow out of the ground. Life was coming out of the ground. And I asked Daryl if this had any meaning for him, and he said no.
And when I said no, Frank got real quiet for a moment, and he said, "Would you please write my phone number down, my name down, and call me if it means anything to your family?" And of course, I thought I'd never talk to Frank again. But a week later, I got a phone call from the sheriff's department. They said, "We have Rachel's backpack ready for you to pick up if you could come get it." So I rushed over to the sheriff's department and picked up her backpack, and I took it out. And I can't even describe the emotions I felt, because there were still blood stains on her backpack. There was bullet holes through it. And I took it out to my car. And when I sat down in my car, I opened it up and took out some of her school books. And there in the bottom of her backpack was her final diary. And like any parent, I wanted to know what she had written on the last day of her life. And so I turned to the last page of her diary, and I was absolutely stunned, because I wasn't looking at something she wrote. I was looking at a picture she drew. And it was a picture of her eyes, and there's a trickle of tears coming out of her eyes. The tears are watering a rose, America's national flower. And the rose in another picture, same rose, was growing out of a Columbine flower, the name of the school, and the Colorado State flower. Well, when the teardrops touched the rose, they turned dark. And for years, I thought that they were blood drops, but I counted the clear tears before they turned dark. There's 13 clear tears falling from her eyes. And within 2 hours of her drawing this picture, 13 people had been murdered at Columbine, a teacher and 12 students. And you see, that was the week of Easter. April 20th, that year was the week of Easter. 2,000 years earlier, another teacher and 12 students had impacted the world. That first teacher, Jesus, was called the Son of David, and he was also called the Lamb of God. Rachel's name in Hebrew means little lamb, and the teacher killed at Columbine that day, his name was David. And that first teacher was brutally wounded in the back as he stumbled on his way to Golgotha, which means the place of a human skull. That second teacher at Columbine was brutally shot in the back and stumbled into the only classroom in that school that had a human skull in it, the science lab, where he bled to death over the next few hours. And there's so many other things that I don't have time to go into that are comparisons. But most of the students at Columbine, their names were biblical names: Isaiah and Daniel and John and Rachel, and the list goes on, and Matthew. And again, there's so much more to this story.
It's just so incredible to me, because I've had prophetic moments of like that in when I was her age, that, and I won't go into, but this is so incredible. And when I saw this picture, I couldn't believe, that she would even. Didn't a teacher ask her? I think a teacher had asked her what those were for, and she didn't know. She was like, I actually don't know.
Well, her teacher, Mrs. Carruthers, said, Rachel, the drawing is beautiful. This was 2 hours before Rachel died. She said, the drawing is beautiful. What is it? And her answer to her teacher was, and Miss Carruthers told us, she said, she didn't answer my question, but she did say this. She said, Miss Carruthers, it's not finished, but I'm going to have an impact on the world. And, Jesus at Calvary said, it is finished. And of course, his work was finished. But Rachel's work, when she died, wasn't finished. It was just getting started. So she said, it's not finished, but I'm going to have an impact on the world. That too was prophetic. And there's one more part to this story that's really important. The first time I ever shared this story was in a little town, Jackson, Tennessee. And I think it was Jackson, Tennessee, if I remember the town. But it was the place where the prototype for the old country stores is at. It was called Cracker Barrel. All the Cracker Barrel stores were patterned after the old country store there in Jackson, Tennessee. And they had brought out chairs from churches. There was thousands and thousands of people who attended. And it was outdoors, and as far as you could see, there were people. They had speakers down the sides, all as far as I could see. And I didn't have visuals that day, but I was sharing this story for the first time. And as I described what happened, there was a little girl sitting about 16 years old over to my left, and she just sobbed for the rest of the entire time I was talking. And when I finished, I walked off the stage, and she ran up to me with her Bible open. And she said, Mr. Scott, I didn't know your daughter's name. I only knew that a parent from Columbine was coming to talk about his daughter. But she said, I was reading this from the Old Testament, and I knew it was supposed to be for the parent that was coming. And she handed me her Bible, and it was opened up to a passage that said, a loud voice was heard in Ramah, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because her children are no more. Thus says the Lord, stop your weeping, dry your tears, for your work will be rewarded, and I shall return the children from the land of captivity and bring them back to the land of their inheritance. And I knew that day, those words went into my human spirit, and I knew from that moment on what I was supposed to do. I was supposed to take her story to the children of the world, and that's what we've done over the last 23 years.
And you have done such an amazing job, and you do Rachel's Challenge, and there's also tell me about the war on the is it store or the
not only has Rachel's life and story touched individuals, but it's touched whole entire cities. Like, for example, in Atlanta a few years ago, we did many schools in the Atlanta area, and the local NBC affiliate that won one of the Emmy Awards because of Rachel's story rented out the Georgia Dome before it was torn down. And we filled that Georgia Dome up with students and parents. Tens of thousands of students and parents came. And we had people from Today's Show and Ellen DeGeneres and others that came on the live screen to greet the crowd. And the children had written down acts of kindness and put them in chain links. And there were thousands, tens of thousands of these chain links. And they hired cranes to raise them up to the ceiling of the Georgia Dome. And it was just a powerful witness to the power of kindness and compassion. And we have these rallies every year all over the country, around the world. We've had them in Mexico, where thousands of people come and celebrate with these chain links of kindness. But in two little towns in Michigan, I'll preface the story by saying this, and then I'm going to show the video. There were two towns that were at war with each other, and they had been feuding for over 50 years. They did not like each other. The mayors didn't like each other. The schools didn't like each other. In fact, they used the word hate. We hate each other. And the police were getting involved with even felonies that were being committed between the two schools. And so a state trooper happened to come and hear me speak at a conference. And she said, we have got to bring this program to our two towns and bring healing to our towns. So this particular video I'm about to show is called The War on the Shore, because these two towns were both located on the shore of one of the lakes in Michigan. And this tells about what happened to bring about their healing.
For almost half a century, a fierce rivalry has existed between two neighboring towns in northern Michigan. What was once a healthy sports rivalry has become increasingly hostile in recent decades.
Oscoda, Michigan, it's known as the Sunrise Side. Our school is about 2 miles offshore of Lake Huron.
Ten miles south of Oscoda is their longtime rival, Tewas.
This is one of those small, rural, sleepy little towns that a lot of people don't think exist anymore.
There's a great disparity in the socioeconomics between the two communities.
I could take you right out here and I can show you 10 houses within a mile where the kids are living in dirt floors. With that poverty comes a mindset and a mentality of fighting and of hate and just bitterness.
Once a year, both towns pack the stands to watch the rivalry game.
It's a game that's talked about all year round.
The game throughout the community is known as
The War on the Shore.
The War on the Shore.
It really is meaningful to a lot of people in both of these towns.
My first year here as assistant, the head coach says, Oscoda, we get ready. This is a big thing, You don't lose to Oscoda. I mean, you hate Oscoda. Well, that got in me. I hated Oscoda.
I go to practice, my coach is like, we hate Tawas. We don't be friends with Tawas. Our mission is to dominate Tawas, kill them in all sports, and rub it in, dig it in.
People said, hey, it's Oscoda. We're not supposed to like them.
If you're from Oscoda, you're going to hate a Tawas person.
It's always been that way, just fundamentally, fathers, brothers, uncles, aunts, sisters.
This rivalry, transcends athletics.
Tawas kids vandalize Oscoda and we return the favor.
Painting the press box, painting buses. There was a toothpick incident a couple years ago.
Michigan State Police is spending their time on figuring out who, put toothpicks in the field to the point where kids could get hurt and they had to cancel the game. And this is getting too far.
As I started to talk to Trooper Pintar, she started telling me about some of the incidents that had happened. The toothpicking of the field, some of defecating on the field on numerous occasions, the fights.
It's town versus town, and somehow that needs to be overcome.
Inspired after seeing a Rachel's Challenge presentation, Michigan State Trooper Jen Pintar pushes to bring the message to Oscoda and Tewas area schools. A few months later, Rachel's challenge is presented to both Oscoda and Tewas area schools, the same week as the rivalry game.
I felt like things just turned around within 15 minutes of her presentation.
Definitely see the difference. Definitely see the difference in the kids. And our guys, especially in the football team, they just had an entirely different air about them.
And talking to our guys, they were impacted a great deal by this.
We all wanted to come together because everyone that I spoke to didn't do it because they had to, they did it because they wanted to.
An idea is born.
You know, how awesome would it be for just 10 minutes before the game, after the game, halftime, sometime during the game when those two communities are facing each other from the bleachers on the sides of the field, to come together and just for those few moments, put everything aside and be together and link arms and be a chain of kindness around that track. Everyone's just getting along.
When they raised their hand and said this, it was just like,
wow. Trooper Pintar actually looked at me and said, I don't know if you know what this means, but I'm almost close to tears.
You know, I said, well, what do you guys think about it? And the whole crowd said, yeah, let's do it.
He said, hey, I heard we're gonna be, holding hands with Oscoda's team at halftime. And I thought it was a joke.
So I thought, oh, this could be bad. if people don't jump on board.
You know, all I could do was pray that it was going to work and that I wouldn't be the only one standing out there on that field.
Tewas versus Oscoda, Friday night.
The superintendent kind of announced, this is what we're going to do. We want everybody to come down.
We'd like to ask that you make your way down to the field.
And you could kind of sense a minute of hesitation, like, do we really do this? Do we really go down and form a chain with our rival that is across the field with us?
Everybody was like just kind of looking around. They're like, I don't know. And me and a couple of my friends were like, no, guys, come on, let's go. This is great. We got to do this.
So the community started coming down and they started making, their way around the field. And they started spreading out, and all of a sudden the football players came out.
And we actually went to Tawas' sideline where their cheerleaders and their fans were.
I actually walked out and I was between two Tawas football players, and they both shook my hand. We gave each other hugs, told each other good luck.
We're burying the hatchet with Tawas, and they're burying the hatchet with us.
What it did for the two communities is insurmountable.
Through bringing Rachel's challenge together, that has really been the bridge that has bonded our two communities like nothing we've ever had. This field has been the source of so much rivalry, and now it's the source of so much healing.
It's probably, as I told several people, the most rewarding, amazing experience of my entire career.
How do you know that trust, compassion, and beauty will not make this world a better place to be in and life a better one to live? My codes may seem like a fantasy that can never be reached, but test them for yourself and see the kind of effect they have in the lives of people around you. You may see a chain reaction. Rachel Joy Scott.
You know what's powerful about that story is that there's 75 churches and healing centers in both towns, but for 50 years, despite the fact there were churches and healing centers there, these people were fighting against each other. And all it took, and by the way, our speaker who went in there, it was only her third time to ever present. And when she got there, she called us and she was scared because she could hear and feel the hatred. And not only that, she said, I'm the only Black person within 100 miles of this place. But one little Black girl went in to a town that had been fighting for 50 years. And she did what the churches and the healing centers could not have done. She brought a story that brought healing and that brought reconciliation. That was 7 or 8 years ago. And to this day, the healing is still there. And the two football teams, when they play each other every year, they will send students from both schools and they meet halfway carrying torches. They exchange the torches and go back to their schools. And then the football players have dinner together after the game.
Oh, that's so beautiful. The scripture, pride goes before the fall, a haughty spirit before destruction. A lot of this is pride, right? And that girl that went in and told Rachel's story, I'm watching this video and I'm thinking, I'm visualizing Rachel from the heavenlies orchestrating this with her beautiful hands that she's traced, and just smiling that, her life has been used in such a magnificent way. And I've seen those moments on the field. My daughter was in water polo, so that's a very aggressive sport. But it is also, she went to a Christian school, and at the end of every game, they get out, win or lose, you get out, you congratulate the opponent, you shake their hand, you do it with grace and kindness, which brings them together. But these two schools somehow lost their way. And what a beautiful story that Rachel's Challenge brought them together. That's magnificent. It's amazing.
And the opposite coin to that verse, pride comes before destruction. The opposite side of that is humble yourself before the Lord and he will lift you up.
Yes.
And we need a lot of humility in our country and in our world today. We need true humility. Not humiliation, but humility.
Yes, and if you think about it, I'd much rather be lifted up than to fall.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going for that second scripture there. Well, there's another thing I want to touch on really quickly. I know we've taken 50 minutes of your time. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much. But there is something that you had sent me that I watched as well, and it's called The Story That Changes Everything.
If I can take a minute to break away, I can pull that up.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
The video you're about to see is called The Story That Changes Everything. And what we've found with Rachel's Challenge, and I do a lot of teacher training, train at a lot of conferences, not only share her story, but I do workshops. And in one of the workshops, I talk about the thing that brings change. I call it the EMP effect. EMP is something most people are aware of. But the EMP I'm talking about is emotional impact. If you can provide in your school, in your classroom, or to the people that you're around, emotional impact, followed by meaningful connections. Connection is the number one prevention of suicide and cutting, and according to the CDC. So impacting a life emotionally, and then meaningful connection, followed by purposeful action, the EMP effect. And that's what you're about to see, is the EMP effect of what a story can bring to the life of a young person.
%71% of students report bullying as being a problem in their school. Students can't learn if they're in a fight or flight mode. They need to feel safe and connected.
Teenage bullying and teasing is an epidemic in this country, and the death rate is climbing.
There have been high-profile cases in every corner of the country.
I see these kids in schools every day. So many of them are from broken homes. So many of them are from homes where they go home and see drug abuse. They see alcoholism.
And for them, their lives are filled with hate and anger and fear.
I really wanted to kill myself because I was so miserable.
I was like, what is it? And he said, well, I can't really describe it to you. He said what they're doing is they're doing presentations in schools all over the country. And the story that they're telling is making a tremendous impact.
Rachel's Challenge is working hard to promote safer, more connected schools where teaching and learning can thrive.
Our administrative team came back and just said, we've got to have this program.
The auditorium and I watch the impact that Rachel's story has on these students.
2,000 students sit in the gymnasium, quiet, respectful.
No matter the audience, the reaction is always the same.
Some of the toughest guys I know
were impacted by Rachel's challenge in a very positive way.
You could feel it that, like, man, this was, pretty much hitting everybody on the heart.
Everything around me changed. It changed the way I live my everyday life, the way I look at little things.
Those students used to have issues with each other. Now they're high-fiving each other. Things are changing.
You see kids who put walls up, and that comes down, and you get to see the real person. And I think that was really important for all the kids to see.
And they start looking around and they start seeing other kids, really seeing them for the first time and understanding that they're just like me. I'm not alone in this world. And I meet kids that on the day we showed up, they were thinking about pulling the plug. They were done. They were hopeless.
I had everything planned out, and I actually had a rope and pills in my bedroom waiting for me when I got home.
It didn't matter what the reason was, but they were hopeless. They needed something. And Rachel was that something.
We get hundreds of letters every year from students, and I remember reading one that just brought me to tears of a 10-year-old girl who had an exact plan to end her life. But at the end of the letter, she said, "Rachel, you saved my life."
And so many adults I meet, they'll say our kids today, they're lost. They don't have respect. They need to have more rules. And they keep telling kids what they can't do. I see kids that are dying to have someone say, here's what you can do. Here's how you can make a difference in the world. Here's your value.
The issue isn't just about ending bullying. It's much deeper than that. It's about connecting with students and having them connect with each other. They need to feel accepted, wanted, loved, and appreciated. We all do.
Our kids today are dying to know they're not alone. They're dying to know that they matter and that they're cared about.
It's about having compassion that they have a story, and having other students realize that when they see this person as a bully, that that's just one layer to them, that this isn't something that defines them at all.
Since Rachel's challenge arrived, you can feel, you can see, you can taste the difference.
We found that there's been a decrease in the number of bullying taking place in the school as a result of Rachel's challenge.
And Rachel's story was that huge thing for them that made the difference, that helped them turn the tide. And they went from hopeless to hopeful that not only their life would mean something, but that they could make a difference in someone else's life. That's the magic of Rachel's story.
That's amazing. That is another incredible example of what Rachel Scott's life has done, and what you're doing to continue on, just helping people. And so for Rachel's challenge, is it safe to say that people can reach out to you? Anyone can reach out to someone at your organization or charity if they're suffering, yes, or they need help, or they need some kind of assistance? How would they do that? How would they go about that?
If any school wants us to come, they can go to rachelschallenge.org or .com, either one. Rachel, RACHELS challenge, CHALLENGE.com or org, and they'll be able to find information about what we do and how. And by the way, I do want to mention that Rachel's Challenge is a non-religious, non-political organization. So you don't have to be concerned. We don't talk about scriptures. We don't, we don't bring faith element. Even though it's a spiritual presentation, it's not a religious presentation. So that's one concern that sometimes people that haven't heard our program ask about. We are non-religious, but the story itself is an emotional impact that brings change to the lives of young people.
And that's one of the things that I love about Rachel so much is that, and I've taught my daughter that in school, you'll see cliques. You'll see certain people over here and certain people over there, but God is inclusive. Jesus was inclusive. And Rachel seemed to be extraordinarily inclusive at such a young age. And I love that you have continued to carry out her heartfelt message in Rachel's challenge. And you're changing lives and saving lives. And her life was not wasted. It is continuing on, and she continues to impact this world. So thank you, Mr. Scott, for just
Thank you.
being amazing. And I know that this was painful and is painful, but you are turning your pain into her purpose and your purpose. And so our hearts go out to you and your family and her brother and mother, and we are grateful for you. So thank you so much for being on our show today. And we will be here in any way that we can. And like I said, if you come to a school around here, I do have my hair license, so I'll show up for the day. I'll show up.
We will contact you.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you so very much. Yes, thank you.
And we're out.
The Coriolis Effect is produced by JS Productions. Producers Cory Oliver and Bob Victor, host Cory Oliver, and editors Bob Victor and Cade Bonsall.
Hi guys, I'm Cory Oliver, and thank you for watching The Coriolis Effect. We hope you enjoyed the previous episode. Here are some more episodes you might enjoy. Hit the subscribe button below, and have a great day.